What's up, everybody? My name's Layne, and I'm trying to read all of the books on my bookshelf that are TBR by the end of 2020. How's that going? Not great, but could be worse. Today we're going to be doing a September book roundup. I wanted this to be last week's video, but I was truly reading up until the 30th of September. So read 10 books in September. I think 2 of them I don't have. One was a library book and one was an audiobook. October holds a lot of Stephen King for me, which I'm not thrilled about. I'm just not the biggest Stephen King fan, but I have a lot of his books and I'm trying to read everything I own. So we're gonna charge right through it. Also, one of his books is on my 100 books poster. Misery is on there. So I'm working through that one, taking my time with it, annotating. September I kind of clumped together as psychological thriller month. So anything that's maybe not considered horror, but more edge of your seat. Think along the lines of The Girl on the Train, Gone Girl, these kind of, like I said, I think edge of your seat is the best term for them. Thrillers, I guess, as opposed to horror. When I decided to tackle my TBR shelf, I organized all of my books that were TBR into months for the rest of the year, which at that point I believe was August, September, October, November. And the books that I don't read, like that I don't make it to for each month, kind of congregate into a TBR pile and get set outside next to my bookshelf, and those are going to be December's reads. It's going to be a little bit more laxed on December because it's the holiday season, and I'm also going to be a little bit more laxed on November because it's National Novel Writing Month, which I think is what a lot of my content is going to revolve around that month here. Let's get into September roundup. I really stuck to the psychological thriller genre, but we're going to get into the books a little bit that didn't stick to that. My first one I made a whole separate video about for the 100 books challenge, and it is Flowers for Algernon, all marked up, looking pretty. There's a whole video on this from last week. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this book. I love this book. This is definitely a junior high reading level, maybe freshman in high school reading level, but I'm not letting this book go ever in my life. Bury me with this book. P.S. If you remember, if you have the time, put some flowers on Algernon's grave. Every time. I'm drinking apple cider, but it's cold, so I don't know if that makes it apple juice. But I think there's actually something like in the cider that makes it cider. Like the way that it's made as opposed to apple juice. My next 2 books I read on a trip home from Wisconsin in the car ride. One of them I did as an audiobook, and the other one I actually found the ebook to on Scribed, but I knew I had the physical book at home. They're both internet poetry. I was kind of struggling for my book count, and I knew I could get through these pretty quickly. I read some internet poetry, which we have all learned from maybe 2 months ago is just not quite my the genre that I really like to read. The first one that I read is Sincerely by F.S. Yusof. I don't want to mispronounce his last name. I think it's Yusof. If I am incorrect, please correct me down below. This is very intimate. It almost reads as like continuous love letters to his fiance, and then at the end of the book he proposes to her in the book. On this page it says, "Will you marry me?" But then in this poem all of the first letters are "Will you marry me?" The language in this is really nice. It's reads more, there are definitely poems in here that read more prosy and that are a little bit more intimate and romantic, and then there are some that are very much in the internet poetry realm, like Ruby Kaur and R.H. Sin. It's pretty balanced. Again, for the genre, I thought it was pretty good. I think I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads. Internet poetry book number 2 I did as an audiobook. I picked up on Scribed Milk and Honey. I've seen a lot of people in the world of poetry really step on internet poetry, and when I call it internet poetry, I don't mean it in a derogatory way. That's what the subgenre is considered, because they are poems that are shared on social media, and that's why they're this big, because you can't open up, you can absolutely, but Charles Wright's Caribou is not purposed to be open up to read and think, wow, it's so relatable to me right now in these circumstances. But that's what internet poetry is written to do. I think that internet poetry gets a lot of hate, and when I talk about internet poetry, I really, I never mean to drag it in a derogatory way, because some people love it. Like, this is what some people read for. I read for teen at the age of almost 27. I read teen books because that is what I like to read. And people connect, like, people just connect with internet poetry. And I love that for them because I think it's so hard to find your feelings and put them into words. And then even once you do that, to feel like you're not alone in it is like, it's such a beautiful thing that you can find these words that somebody else has written and think, hey, that's applicable to me. I feel that way too. I know I'm not alone in feeling that way. It's not for me. I just wanted to take the time to explore a genre that I don't typically read. I have a lot of respect for Rupi Kaur for doing what she did as a woman of color, as a woman in general, and then to swing in as a woman in literature and take the bestseller chart by the horns and just... I listened to it as an audiobook, and Ruby actually reads it. I think that there were absolutely some poems in the book that I took in more than others, and she touches on such heavy topics. She touches on abuse, and she touches on relationships in general, and she touches on sex, and I think that it's hard to find writing in those topics that can relate to younger people that may not have the resources otherwise, if that makes sense. I'm glad that I took the time to read Milk and Honey. I'm glad that I did the audiobook to hear the author read it, because I think that hearing the author read their own poetry is such a powerful thing, and then you hear it as it's intended to be read, which you may not be reading it as in your head. That's my 2 cents on internet poetry. I think a lot of people get very snobby when it comes to poetry, and I don't care enough, you guys, like, I don't care enough to be like, this is the poetry that I read, and if you read internet poetry, you suck, because it sucks. That's not how I feel about it. I think, like, as long as people are reading, as long as people are writing, and people are reading what they want to read and writing what they want to write, then, and you're not hurting anybody, then do what you want to do, man. Like, and don't let people tell you, like, oh, you're reading that sucks. Because first of all, the people making those comments have nothing to get out of that by saying like, oh, internet poetry, that sucks. Just read what you want to read. And if people need to put down a genre or put down a book to feel better about themselves and their like credentials or whatever they're reading, then like, girl, let them step away. You don't need them. You don't need that. You don't need that negativity. If that's what makes you feel good, if that's what makes your soul feel good, read them. Just read them. Read what makes you feel good, but don't stop reading. That's kind of my point blank period. I think internet poetry gets a lot of hate, and I don't want the people hating on internet poetry to make people who read it feel bad about reading it. I think that's garbage. I think that's absolute garbage. I think everybody should read what they want to read, and everybody should write what they want to write. Do it for you, baby. Do it for you. The next stack of books is, I think they're all psychological thrillers. Oh no, there was one more book that I got from the library. Let's talk about that one before I get into the more physical books that I have, and then because they kind of all clump in genre. The book that I got from the library was the second book in the Brown Sisters series. I believe last month I read Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I loved it. I loved it so much. So this month I read the book about her sister, and it's Take a Hint, Dani Brown. Dani is an English professor, and every day she walks into school and she brings a coffee for the security guard, whose name I don't remember, but she brings a coffee for the security guard, and the security guard gives her a protein bar because she always forgets her breakfast. One day, I think somebody pulls the fire alarm or something happens in the school, and the security guard runs in. He's like, has anybody seen Dani Brown come out? I haven't seen her come out. So he runs in and he carries her out in his arms, and there's like no fire or anything. I think it's somebody just pulled the alarm, and carries her out in his arms, and all of a sudden it just like goes crazy on social media. They have like a hashtag. He used to play either rugby or lacrosse, and now he has a foundation for like a fundraising foundation for rugby or lacrosse, whichever one he played. And he takes these with all of these hits they're getting on social media, that's gaining traction. So they decide to keep fake dating to help him. It's so cute. It's so cute. Talia Hibbert writes them, and she's so talented. She's so good at making scenarios that are so real, and they're such grounded things, but they're just whimsical enough that like you get totally whisked up in the romance of these two people. Both of her characters are so well-rounded. I wish I could remember his name. So it's Dani and Chloe, and then the third Brown Sisters book comes out at the beginning of next year. And I'm really excited because then they all show up in like Dani's book, and she has to go consult them for advice. Then you see Chloe and you see her husband, and it's so good. It's so good. I can't wait for the third one. I can't wait. It was so good. Okay, now let's get into psychological thrillers. These are in no particular order. I'm going to kick it off with The Safest Lies, which I got at Half Price Books for $1. The Safest Lies is about this girl, Kelsey, and Kelsey gets into a car accident the one night, and the boy that comes to save her, he's a volunteer firefighter. They go to high school together. His name is Ryan. Yes, Ryan. So they become friends. Meanwhile, Kelsey's mom has their house on like a full lockdown, like security system, high gates, can't get out of the house. One day Kelsey comes home and she finds that her mom's missing. There have been no notes, nothing left behind for them. Ryan ends up at the house with her, and there's people walking around the yard. It really revolves around like Kelsey and Ryan. But one of her mom's friends kind of also watches Kelsey, and she's got 2 kids, so they're involved. Kelsey's best friend is involved. So most of the book trying to figure out where is mom and who is kind of lurking outside the house. Like a big chunk of the book takes place with them inside the house. It was pretty good. It was a quick read. I think I gave this either 3 or 4 stars on Goodreads. I'm not going to be hanging on to this one. I think that this is just like not one that I'm going to be going back and rereading. Second one is an advanced reader's copy that I got when I worked at the bookstore of The First Mistake by Sandy Jones. Sandy Jones has another book out called The Other Woman, and I didn't know if I had to read The Other Woman first, but I didn't, and I hung on to this one okay. So this cute little card on the front because it's the arc, and it's like, I won't forget you, you'll always be the first mistake. Basically, you're with 3 characters in this book. You're with Alice, and Alice is an architect, and she runs an architecture company with her husband, Nathan. Nathan's her husband's name. And Nathan keeps kind of pushing for this job in Japan. Then speculation of an affair starts to come out between the 2 of them. Alice starts to suspect Nathan of being involved with another woman. The third character you get is Alice's best friend, Beth. There's something going on with Beth, and you don't really know what it is until like middle chunk of the book. You get a lot of Beth, and you find out that these 2 women have a character that's, I don't think he's present in the book, but due to their past they have like a common, like a character in common. So you get kind of a little bit of that, and then that kind of leaves you guessing to the end. There's something going on with Nathan, and you can't figure out what it is, and you're kind of led to believe it's an affair the whole time, but it's not. But it's also not. I almost would have rather had it been an affair than what it was. This was just not. It was good. It was just also not like a fast-paced. I think it could have been a lot faster. And then, like I said, it kind of interjects to this random middle section with Beth, where you get more of Beth's backstory. I think that this would have been really interesting had it been by character. So like Alice, Beth, Nathan, and like told from all 3 perspectives, rather than like, this is all, I think it's all first person Alice. It's all first person Alice, and then you get this Beth chunk in the middle. I don't know, it was okay. I will also not be hanging on to this one. The only reason I would hang on to it is because the packaging is kind of cool. If you're looking for a new author in the psychological thriller realm, it was okay. I expected more from the end of the book, and I did not get more from the end of the book. And I think that some of these other books that we're going to talk about had like a page-paced ending, so you're really like leading and climbing, and then you get to the end and it's pages and pages of the end. But the end for this one was kind of like a one line, like, wait, so you mean this means this? And it's like, okay, thanks, because that was on the last page. If I was like looking for something else to read, I might go pick up The Other Woman. This is a very 3 or 4 star month, so either 3 or 4 stars on my Goodreads. The next one I've been holding on to for a while on my shelf. This is Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. Back into the kind of the relationship genre of thrillers. You have a couple here. Her name is Grace and his name is Jack. They look like this perfect couple to all of their friends. They come off very well put together, and they have this house, and Jack's a gentleman, and like everything seems so perfect. Jack is not very kind to Grace behind closed doors. He keeps Grace, like Grace has to stay in one room of the house. Like, you can eat right now. He brings her food to her, and this is all told from her perspective. It goes back between the past and the present, and the past tells the story of her and Jack getting together and traveling. I think the big plot of the past is like a trip to Thailand they took together, and the present you have her and Jack, and then you also have her niece. I think she has a niece named Millie, and Millie is mentally challenged, and Millie goes to this school for other mentally challenged kids, but Jack kind of keeps pushing for Millie to come live with them, and Grace knows it's not going to end well. So you're with the 3 of them the entire book, told from Grace's perspective. This one was really good. I had a hard time sitting down reading it and getting into it, but I finished it as an audiobook on the trip up to Wisconsin, and I buzzed through the audiobook. The woman that read it was so good. The audiobook kept me more interested in the book than the actual book did. I would recommend this one. I'm actually gonna hang on to this one to rearrange my shelf height back there. But yeah, Behind Closed Doors was one of the best ones I read this month. I have one more after this. My next two are by Ruth Ware. I've never read Ruth Ware before, and I picked these both up. I think I picked up the Layne Game for $1 at Half Price Books, and I picked up the In a Dark Dark Wood hardcover on bargain at Barnes & Noble. You can start with In a Dark Dark Wood. I liked better out of the two of them. In a Dark Dark Wood is you're following this girl named Lenora. She gets invited to a bachelorette party from a girl she went to high school with named Claire, and she can't really figure out why she got invited to the bachelorette party because they haven't talked in a long time. She has another friend there that's also like, we haven't talked to Claire in a long time. What are we doing here? And then Claire's maid of honor is, I think her name is Flo. Flo's very like, this has to be her best weekend. So Flo is a little bit bananas, and you're trying to figure out why she's a little bit bananas. I think there's two other people in the house, but one of them ends up leaving early. And the other one is this guy that also somehow ties into Claire's life. About halfway through the book, you find out who the husband is and how the husband ties back to Lenora. But you spend the whole book trying to figure out, what are you guys all doing here? I really enjoyed this book. I thought this book I'm excited to read more Ruth Ware. But this book also set a high standard for the rest of her books that I've heard some of her books don't live up to. But this book is also really interesting because it goes also between kind of the past and, I wouldn't call it the past, it goes between the bachelorette party, and then you start with kind of this stream of consciousness of Lenora waking up in the hospital. So they're both like evenly paced as you're going through the hospital. She's trying to get answers, but nobody can give her answers. And you're hearing words dropped like murder and like this person's dead. And so while that's being paced and she's figuring it all out in the hospital, you're figuring it all out in real time at the bachelorette party. I loved this book. I'm going to be holding on to this one. In a Dark Dark Wood was such a good debut, and I did not like the Layne Game as much. The Layne Game is about these 4 girls. I don't remember all of their names. Fatima, Taya, Kate, and I think the protagonist is Isa. Isa gets a text from Kate, who sent a group text out to everybody that says, I need you. This woman was walking her dog past this body of water, and this body part washed up. And Kate texts all these girls and says, I need you. So you spend most of this book trying to figure out who ties in where, what happened, who's dead, and why. And this one did a really nice job with the characters. I thought that the 4 girls were very interesting. Kate's dad is involved. He used to be a teacher at the school that they all went to, where they're going back to the town that their school is in. And then Kate also had like a stepbrother or some kind of relative that they think they were going to adopt him, and he came over from England. So now he's also kind of wrangled in. I was very interested to see the end because she created this huge knot. But then the end happened, and there were little moments with characters in the book, and he kind of lost me here. And that happened continuously till we found out what happened. And then when we found out what happened, I was like, oh. It was a little bit underwhelming. I am going to hang on to it, trying to get all of her books because I do really like her as an author. I do really like her writing. My last one, and potentially my favorite one that I read this month. This one was really cool, and it was so interesting, and it was I think this was actually the last book that I read in September. So it was such an interesting way to end it and kind of guide into October. It's Lauren Oliver's Rooms. I like Lauren Oliver a lot because she writes a lot of YA. She wrote my favorite YA fantasy trilogy, the Delirium trilogy, and she writes a lot of YA fiction. If you're looking for a new author to get into, Lauren Oliver comes highly recommended from me, who has 20-something subscribers on YouTube. She's one of my favorite authors, truly, of all time. Rooms is her book it's written for adults. I believe it's just considered fiction. I have to open it up and read the characters too, because you are with a lot of people in the book. There's the patriarch of the family, Richard, has died. Richard has a wife named Caroline. He has a son, Trenton, and he has a daughter, and his daughter's name is Minna. And so the 3 of them are coming to the house to set up his ceremony and to all be together and spend time together. And the book goes into all of their perspectives. Each chapter is told from a different character. So you'll get a whole Caroline chapter, you'll get a Trenton chapter. There are also 2 other characters named Alice and Sandra. and Alice and Sandra are ghosts that live in the house, and you get their perspective and some of their backstories as well. There's a lot going on in this book, so stick with me. The book is broken up into sections. There's part 1, part 2, part 3, and they're named after different rooms in the house. So part 3 is called the basement. So once you flip to the basement, the first part is Alice, and Alice tells a piece of story that pertains to the basement. All of the characters then will revolve around the basement of the house. It'll go from room to room to room in the house, and you get the 2 ghosts in the house, and then you get family stories from those rooms of the house. Meanwhile, Trenton is able to see this girl. There's this dead girl in the house. She's absolutely a ghost. Kind of simultaneously with the girl who's a ghost, there's a missing girl. Man, did that have me hanging out till the end, because I did not expect that at all. And it didn't even give anything away. Like, those are just big plot points. Trenton can see this ghost girl in the house who is not quite all the way dead yet, like Alice and Sandra. The police are also coming because there's a girl missing. I loved this book. This was my favorite book I read this month. It was just so interesting. And Lauren Oliver has such a beautiful writing style, so it just really keeps you encapsulated until the end of the book. That's all I've got. Thank you guys for coming and watching another video. I appreciate you all for taking the time out so much to listen to me ramble about books and preach internet poetry and book hate. And I will see you all next week. Bye.